Breaking tonight, President Trump says he won't fire Robert Mueller, despite a growing number of Republicans who say the investigation is tainted. Evening, everyone. Welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism. And tonight, a slightly croaky voice as well. But I've got my lemon and honey. We're all set. We've got some incredibly important information and analysis for you tonight. I hope you can stay with us. Fox and Friends host Ainsley Earhart among my guests tonight. Plus, last week's Swamp Watch made big waves on social media, and tonight I'll debate it with someone who says I got it all wrong. Also tonight, you'll get my thoughts on what the Alabama Senate election means for populism in America. But first, Democrats say it's a right-wing conspiracy theory, a distraction to discredit Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his investigation, which has so far yielded 4 indictments from Trump world. But from Republicans' accusations this weekend of improper evidence gathering, on top of last week's revelations of biased text messages, they're saying the fix is in and the deep state bid to take down the president is real. So the question remains, will the GOP be celebrating its likely passage of the tax bill this week, or will it be in full defense mode after President Trump fires Mueller? For his part, the president himself was asked that question point blank today, and here's what he said.
No, I'm not. No.
So there you have it. Or do you? Let's discuss that with our panel. Executive Director of the Black Sphere, syndicated radio host and Fox News contributor, Kevin Jackson. Also with us, Olympic Media Managing Editor, Katie Freites. And syndicated columnist and host of the Navarrete Nation podcast, Ruben Navarrete. So let's start with this Mueller business. Viewers will know that we rarely cover this story because I just think the whole thing is so ridiculous. Sorry, putting my piece of editorial in there right at the beginning. But Kevin, what do you think? There's been a real kind of swirl of rumors about the president moving towards firing Mueller. He said he wouldn't, but what do you make of it all?
I don't think why would he? You know, when somebody's kicking their own butt, why do you want to get in the fight? You know, this has been one of these things where I think it's vindicating Trump at every turn. And when you've allowed the so-called deep state to just uncover all of its dirt on its own, what does he need to fire him for? Every time Donald Trump lets these guys go at it, and by the way, I predicted this a while back. You look at what happened with Strzok, what happened with every piece of information has led to the untenable conclusion that there was no collusion with Russia, and if they're going to turn it on itself, it's going to now these guys are investigating themselves more than they're investigating Trump. So why would you make a change?
So you think it's there's no need to fire him, just got to let it keep going. There's nothing to worry about.
Sure.
But that's not what people. I mean, you come from DC to be with us tonight. What's the rumor mill saying? That's not really where people are at. They're not so relaxed about it.
Well, so a lot of actually of my Republican and conservative friends would agree with Kevin that Trump firing Mueller would be the absolute worst thing that he could do because the narrative is unraveling right now. You've got these
Mueller's narrative.
Yes,
right.
Yes, and the collusion, and
right.
It's falling apart on its own. And for Trump to then turn around and fire him, that gives ammo to the left, that gives ammo to the media, and that gives ammo to people who do not like him to say, see, he's worried about someone. He's trying to push him out of the way so he doesn't have to deal with him anymore. I think he should just let this go, let all of the facts come out, because right now it's not good for him. But I would say that the president does need to be careful in his tweets and what he says about this. You know, don't step in anything that you could avoid by being hot on the tweet trigger. So
the narrative about collusion, I completely agree. I mean, I always thought it was a joke, and it looks like that, as you say, it's completely unraveling. They do seem to have shifted it onto this, whatever, obstruction of justice or some other kind of, procedural missteps that the president and his team might have made. Do you think that he might be got through that route, and therefore there still is something to worry about?
Well, we're going to have to wait and see, right? There's a lot of stuff that we don't know right now, and a lot of stuff that I think we probably shouldn't know. I don't think the media needs to know every single tidbit of every detail going on with this, because it generally leads to confusion and things that are untrue, facts that may, be alternative. Right now, I don't think they've got anything. It doesn't seem like they have anything that's concrete, dead to rights.
The opposite. The procedural problems are on the left, because now they're looking at the evidence that was gathered in the
we have
beginning.
Demotions and firings. And
exactly.
I think that's right. So, Ruben, don't you think there is a risk with this, that for the left, that they've invested in this so heavily, like this is it. They think this is the way they're going to bring down the president. And actually, what's coming out is not helpful to them.
No, you're absolutely right, Steve. Great to be back with you. I'll tell you, Katie is right that you don't want to make Bob Mueller into a martyr, a victim. to change the narrative and make him much more sympathetic. Kevin's right that Mueller's doing a horrible job of managing his investigation. He hasn't kept his people in line. The fact that these embarrassing emails and text messages that make it clear that some of the people who were supposed to be investigating the president were trying to bring him down, saw themselves as somehow responsible for protecting American democracy from the president. But to your point, I think it's important to keep in mind the long game here, and that is that the president is much better served by leaving Mueller just where he is. And waiting this out, because anything that we've seen so far, it basically comes down to obstruction. So-and-so lied to the FBI, but it's not gotten close to Trump. And the media puts these seeds out about firing Mueller. But I got to tell you, Steve, I watch the news pretty carefully, as we all do. I've never seen the president even think about or talk about, hint at firing Mueller.
That is so true.
That's a media concoction.
And what it is they want him to do it.
Oh, totally.
Because think about it.
It gives them a whole new thing to go on.
Absolutely. He stacked the deck against Donald Trump with all these Hillary lovers, anti-Trump people. And then I haven't heard Russia come up in ages. It's all now, okay, we got to look at Peter Strzok, the various people that are now, donated money to the Clinton campaign. It's an investigation that is now investigating itself.
I want to get to tax in a second, but just Ruben, one last word from you on this, because our mutual friend, Peggy Noonan, she's constantly written about this in a way that says, look, whatever happens, the invest is going on, and it has to be done in a way that, at the end, brings the country together, because everyone can agree that it was fairly conducted. It's too late for that, isn't it?
It's overly optimistic. I love my friend Peggy, but I think we're so divided, and we're so divided over Trump.
I can't see any way that this investigation wins the confidence of the whole nation, whatever happens at the end of it.
And the real danger, to your point, we talk about populism a lot on this show. Those Democrats should be looking at ways to bring along a populist message those wayward Democrats back from the Rust Belt. Go to Michigan, go to Ohio, go to Pennsylvania. They put all their eggs in the Russia basket. All the eggs in the Russia basket. If that doesn't bear some sort of success for them, they're in trouble.
Well, we got a quick word on and that brings me to economics and the tax bill. Katie, what do you think? My take on it is that it's not about who wins the argument now as to whether it's popular or not popular. It's about the actual effect on those kinds of people who are really looking to President Trump to get the economy moving, jobs back, incomes up. How do you judge this tax bill? Will it really do the job for working people?
I think it will. It seems like across the board, the agreement in the short term is that it will absolutely help. Long term, people are a little mixed on what they think it's going to do. But you see the polls that have come out in their confidence of the president's performance with the economy. And it's much, much higher than his approval rating, because it doesn't have anything to do with what they think of his personality. It has to do with what they think of having more money in their pockets, a better life for their families, perhaps better jobs and more opportunities coming out of the year that the president's been in charge of this economy. And I think this tax bill is only going to help that. And you know what? It might not have every nitty-gritty thing that everyone wants, but it's better than nothing, and it has to get passed.
So the thing that makes me laugh, Kevin, is you hear all these Democrats say, "Oh, it's going to help the rich and all the rest of it." Well, when they were in power, what happened? Who made the rich richer? Who made the poor poorer? Inequality widened under the Democrats. So what are they talking about?
2 words: we won. They passed Obamacare. Most of the nation hated it. You've seen the outcome. At least with Trump, you've got 1 year under your belt. And consumer confidence through the roof, unemployment at an all-time low. What can you look at and go, this guy doesn't make it happen? So when he proposes something, at the very least, you can say, I've got a year of success. Contrast that with Obama's first year, where he had lost 4 million jobs, unemployment through the roof, and on. And why would you follow that logic? So Trump has a proven track record, and believe me, those Rust Belt Democrats and all the people that supported him, they understand this. Add to this the Russia snipe hunt, all these other things. The economy is going to crater when Trump becomes president, and all the other doomsday prophecies.
And you watch the Dow go up.
Up. And so you add to this.
Look at that choreographed hand gestures. Very nice teamwork there.
We're like the 1-2 punch here, man.
Ruben, just a quick last word on the tax bill.
I'm not persuaded. I'm not.
Dear. Okay.
I think they oversold it. I think I have shades of Obamacare here, where Democrats were so eager to pass anything. They passed something that even their own base wasn't thrilled with. I think that Republicans are under tremendous pressure to deliver something, but I don't think it's going to deliver the help to the middle class.
Okay, so look, I think I might wrap that up in saying I kind of partly agree. I said this last week. I think they kind of wrongly sold it.
Skeptical.
I think that actually it will have a really big positive effect on the competitiveness of our companies and our economy, and that will lead to investment and more jobs, not necessarily higher wages. But thank you very much for all of that. Just before we go to break, I didn't want to ignore what happened this week in Alabama with the special election. So here is a Steve Says all about that. Critics of the president on the left and the right seized on Roy Moore's defeat in Alabama as a defeat for populism. But populism isn't Roy Moore. It's not Steve Bannon. It's not even Donald Trump. Populism is a people's movement based on a set of ideas aimed at advancing the interests of working people and rejecting the elitist ideology of establishment Republicans and Democrats that made the rich richer and half the country poorer. Populism is pro-worker, while elitism is pro-owner. Populism is pro-family, while elitism is pro-individual. Populism is pro-democracy, while elitism is pro-oligarchy. The big issues driving the populist movement, they were barely debated in the Alabama special election. Wage stagnation, uncontrolled immigration and the importing of cheap labor, the concentration of corporate power, our economic surrender to China, trade deals that hurt American workers, corruption in our political system. Are the jubilant never-Trumpers and the newly perky elitist Democrats really going to claim that all of that was on the ballot and rejected last Tuesday? Of course not. Everyone knows that Roy Moore had nothing to do with populism, and neither does the Alabama result. What matters now for 2018, for 2020, and for years after that is building that positive, pro-worker policy agenda and getting it implemented at every level of government. That is the next revolution we need. Coming up, last week's Swamp Watch took on the ethanol industry and showed how the gas in your car was really fueling the DC swamp. We got a ton of responses, some praising our report, others not so much. A representative from the corn growers industry will join me later for a heated debate. And after the break, a Chicago politician goes to the United Nations for help in solving the city's out-of-control violence. All the details on that next. Chicago violence is back in the news with over 3,400 shooting victims this year. President Trump on Friday asked what a lot of us are asking: what the hell is going on in Chicago? It's getting so bad that one of the county commissioners is asking the United Nations to come to Chicago and help quell the violence. Listen.
I'm hoping to appeal to the UN to actually come to Chicago and meet with victims of violence and maybe even possibly help out in terms of peacekeeping efforts, because I think it's so critical for us to make sure that these neighborhoods are safe.
Yeah, the UN, that'll really do the job. Mayor Rahm Emanuel seems unconcerned. In fact, he's taking a shot at President Trump by calling his city a Trump-free zone. Listen.
You recently declared Chicago schools a Trump-free zone.
The city of Chicago, yeah.
The whole thing?
The whole thing, man.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Look, Donald Trump is driving forward looking through the rearview mirror, and I'm not going that way because I want my city going that way, and I don't want it to be a Trump-free zone.
I mean, honestly, what a... Can I say... I'm not going to swear, but I mean, really... Unbelievable, right? I mean, what's he talking about? You know, there he is pouncing around New York, pandering to, elitist audience while all this is going on. It's just ridiculous, Kevin, isn't it?
Yeah, they say nothing is foolproof for a sufficiently talented fool. And Rahm Emanuel proves that every single day. Look, he's got a city that's more dangerous than war zones. And he wants to bring in a group whose charter is to bring world peace. And there are more wars going on right now in the world than it ever before. The UN hasn't been successful in putting any wars out. Go count them. You know, you've got Darfur, you've got Syria, and I could name them until the show ended. And he wants to bring these guys in. And what's funny is Rahm Emanuel is the same guy that said to gang violence when a kid got killed, a 9-year-old black kid got shot in a drive-by. He said to the gangs, look, don't bother the kids. Take it to the alley. So he didn't even want to solve the problem. He told gangbangers, take your crime to the alley, because that's what he thinks about the blacks. As long as that crime is isolated, I'm going to make it racial, as long as that crime is isolated in neighborhoods of color, he doesn't have to worry about it. When it comes to the Miracle Mile, then he'll be concerned.
Well, this is really at the heart of it. And, our dear friend Leslie Marshall, I saw her talking about this this week on another show on Fox, and she made the perfectly valid point that underlying the violence are really serious social problems. You know, you have the family breakdown and addiction and poor policing and housing and problems and all the rest of it. But hang on a second, they don't just come out of thin air. That's the result of bad policy and bad government. So why aren't they dealing with those underlying issues in any of these big cities?
Because those are a lot more difficult. They take a lot more time to fix, and they're harder to quantify, whereas you can just say more gun laws, throw some more money at it, see we're helping, but you're not actually doing anything. They're not tackling, education,
right.
Encouraging a good family unit,
yes.
encouraging, having the father present in a home. They're not doing any of that. They're just throwing money at it. And I'm sorry, Rahm Emanuel's statement was asinine. To come on and say this is a Trump-free zone, how can you say that you care about your city when you're just pandering to liberals and being mean to Trump?
Exactly
That's ridiculous. It was embarrassing, and he should be ashamed of himself.
Ruben, can you point to any examples where some of those underlying problems, and I think that is the serious heart of this discussion, right? Because this has been going on for a very long time. Chicago's the worst, most high-profile example, but there are other cities as well, where some of these underlying problems, the family breakdown, the educational failure, where they're really being addressed. Can you think of any examples right now in America?
No, it's become this horrible, endless debate between the sides that say it's all really about poverty and education, opportunities and jobs, versus values. And I think whether you're talking about parents in general, white parents, black parents, brown parents, and little green parents on Mars, parents have responsibilities to raise their children correctly. And I was really struck, I know a lot of us were, with what Denzel Washington, the actor, said recently, where he just basically said what sounded a very conservative message, but a very common sense message, saying that if it breaks down in the home, then the streets will raise your kids, the jails will become their home. And rather than have that conversation, we'd rather talk about the UN, and we'd rather talk about poverty and jobs and the like, because the first conversation is way too messy and way too touchy.
Well, do you see, the thing I like, one thing, just to be fair, that I liked about President Obama and all this was he sort of tiptoed into it, didn't he, with that initiative, My Brother's Keeper. What happened to that?
But it's like everything else with leftism. It's all talk. If you really solve the problems, you get rid of the money. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into these so-called problems, into solving of them. But look, how long have we been talking about this?
Right.
Rahm Emanuel's been the mayor of that city for a long time. And the gun violence is continuing. Not gun violence, the violence in general, with all the gun laws, to Katie's point. Doesn't matter what laws you pass, criminals are going to be criminals until they have opportunity. So Trump's approach, which Rahm Emanuel should be welcoming, is an economic approach, which is let's look at true empowerment zones. Let's put them near black neighborhoods or neighborhoods where these violence.
When you talk about empowerment zones, you mean for business startups and that kind of thing?
Economic empowerment. Look, blacks are forced. We're not bad people. We don't have a propensity for violence any more than anybody else. But you put us in those circumstances, and that's what will happen. So if you can give me an opportunity to get out of those circumstances, I'll do it. But all the policies in every one of these major cities, Chicago's just one example, in every one of them, from Chicago to Cleveland to Baltimore to St. Louis, you name it, is all the same. You have mayors who will tax the crap out of you, chase their companies out, don't do anything in the inner cities.
I'm also thinking about. Sorry, I'm really sorry. We're out of time on this.
Sorry, Ruben.
You can have instead of Chicago, you can talk about China. I'll give you extra time on China.
In the green room. We'll talk in the green room. We'll settle it.
Coming up, Ainsley Earhart joins us to talk about her new book and the amazing charity she's supporting that's helping the families of heroic veterans. There she is. I'm so excited to talk to her. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Before we talk to Ainsley Earhart about her beautiful book, here's more on Folds of Honor, the charity she's helping support that provides scholarships to children of fallen and wounded veterans. Take a look.
In the folded flag, we see the heavy price of freedom. Nearly 9 out of 10 dependents of America's fallen and disabled soldiers do not qualify for federal scholarship assistance. The Folds of Honor closes that gap, already providing over 10,000 scholarships.
Blair was an A-10 pilot stationed in Naval Air Station New Orleans. Blair went out on a beautiful day in April in 2008 to go and train the next generation of fighter pilots, and he never came home. And what my children have lost, but yet what they've gained through Folds of Honor is just so much more than we even knew was available or possible. My little boy said, Mom, he said, why would anybody want to pay for my school. They didn't know my daddy. And I said, nobody, they didn't know your daddy, but they love this country and they love the sacrifice that you have made and that your dad made for this country to keep us free. Just so grateful to people who don't know us to allow us to benefit from their generosity.
Duty, honor, country.
With me now. How exciting is this? It's a Sunday evening, and here she is, Ainsley Earhart. You know and love her from Fox and Friends in the Morning, and she's also the author of Through Your Eyes. Ainsley, just before we talk about the book, I just wanted to ask you how you connected with this fantastic organization. What's the story behind that?
Well, Steve, you know our senior producer, Gavin Haddon, who works on Fox and Friends and has for a long time, and is a good friend of mine. And we were just looking at all of these different charities because I knew I wanted to give back. I grew up in a family where you tithe on your paycheck, and I wanted to tithe on any money that I was going to bring home from these books. And so I was talking to Gavin about it, and he said, Ainsley, he said, this is a charity that honors children, that recognizes children of fallen soldiers, and it helps our military families. You hear stories like that lady in the piece, and I've met so many kids from South Carolina that the proceeds from my books have helped send to college. And you hear their stories, and you think, gosh, this is the perfect match, because my dad served 20 years in the Army Reserves. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. And you meet Dan Rooney, who you see there when I presented the $50,000 check to him. He started this organization, and Steve, it's just great. He served our country and was coming back from his second tour in Iraq, and he was on a plane, and the pilot came over the loudspeaker and said, please stay in your seats because we're about to take the body of someone who didn't make it home, who fought for our country. And he watched out of the window on the tarmac, and they wheeled this flag-draped casket over to this little boy and his mom. And he thought, who's going to teach him to play baseball? Who's going to teach him right from wrong? And who's going to pay for his college? And so he said, you know, I'm going to do that. And he started doing that, and he's raised, Steve, millions of dollars to send children to college, children who don't have their parents. And you hear their stories, and it's just so touching. We have to do something for them.
Well, it's such a good cause, but honestly, Ainsley, I think this book and the one last year, Take Heart, My Child, which I really loved as well, they're a good cause in their own right. I mean, I've read them with my two boys, and there's something really magical about these books.
Thank you.
The incredible illustrations and the words, they're all quiet and still when you read with them. Tell us how you feel about this incredible success you've had as an author with these magical books.
Well, thank you. You just saw that picture of a baby. That's my daughter in my kitchen. That was the first time she got her hands on the books. And I wrote the first book. There's my little girl, Hayden. She's 2 years old. The first book was about these little notes that my dad would leave next to our cereal bowls and just little sayings. And so I incorporated all of those in this lyrical lullaby when I was pregnant with Hayden. And they were all the messages that I wanted to pass on to her. And then it turns out the book was wildly successful, and we made it to the #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, thanks be to God. And we were printing it in different languages in different countries, and I thought, we're a family from South Carolina, and my dad's messages are in the hands of kids all over the world. How cool is that? And then this book right there that you see, called Through Your Eyes, it just came out. It is about, you know, we talk about the FBI, we talk about Russia, we talk about the Harvey Weinsteins every single morning on Fox and Friends and on your show. And then we walk outside and we see all these Christmas lights, and we see the Christmas trees and the carolers, and we go to the parties and we're wrapping gifts, and we have a week left and we're all on this deadline. But we have to take a moment to slow down and realize that you have to walk through life and look at it through your child's eyes and appreciate all the things that we forget. You know, it's not, I don't want people to miss Christmas. I don't want people to miss watching their kids grow up. We're all so stressed and we're so busy, but just take a moment to just stop and smell the roses and breathe a little bit. And that's what this book is about.
I so agree with that message generally, and this book really helps with that. Honestly, I would say to anyone watching, if there's any child in your life, whether it's your kids or your grandchildren or nieces and nephews, they've got to get these books. Ainsley, tell us where people can get a hold of them. What should they do right now to get these books for Christmas?
Thank you so much. I have a website. It's AinsleyEarhartBooks.com. You can also go on any of the sites, any of your local bookstores. Support your local bookstores, please. Amazon's a great place too. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, they've all been great to me with helping me with the book and helping Folds of Honor. So it's called Through Your Eyes, and I hope you'll pick up a copy and give it to someone for Christmas or for a baby shower, or a lot of grandparents are buying it, and even if you have a kid going to college next year and you just want to give them something for Christmas to say I love you, it's a great opportunity to do just that.
Well, exactly. Well, Ainsley, we love you. Thank you so much for being with us.
I love you too. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon on Fox and Friends, I hope. Merry Christmas.
Exactly. That's
Merry
right.
Christmas to you and those precious children.
Night, Ainsley. Coming up, last week's Swamp Watch got a huge reaction, and not all of it was positive. When we come back, a representative from the National Corn Growers Association is here to challenge our take on the ethanol industry. You won't want to miss that. Last week's Swamp Watch on the corrupt ethanol industry and its political cronies in Washington drew a massive response. Here's a few quick clips from our segment. The federal government forces energy companies to produce a certain amount of ethanol fuel every year. They call it the Renewable Fuel Standard. Of course, if they were being honest, they'd call it the Renewable Fuel Racket. Dressed up as action to help the environment, ethanol is in fact just one more example of big government in bed with big business at your expense. Guess who gets thousands of dollars in donations from pro-ethanol companies and interest groups? Step forward, Iowa Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst. How dare Senator Ernst use hard-working family farmers in Iowa to cover up her corruption? If you want a textbook example of how the system is rigged to favor the big and powerful, this is it. Since that segment aired, we've received tweets from viewers, a letter from the CEO of a pro-ethanol lobbying firm, and were even contacted by the office of Senator Ernst herself. Here's what we said in Swamp Watch. The ethanol racket, number one, hurts consumers by raising prices on their gasoline and their groceries. Number two, hurts small refiners who do not have the infrastructure to produce and mix ethanol and have to pay large refiners to do it for them. Number three, it's not as environmentally friendly as its supporters claim. And number four, only continues to exist because the companies and organizations that make money off of ethanol buy the support of key politicians and spend millions of dollars a year lobbying to keep the regulation in place. Many of you pointed out that the big oil companies spend even more money on lobbying against ethanol, and that is absolutely right. You can be sure that we will be doing a Swamp Watch on big oil in the new year. But tonight, as a follow-up to last week's Swamp Watch, I want to discuss this topic with Kevin Ross from the National Corn Growers Association. Kevin, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for joining me. I just want to ask a basic question that I think our viewers will be interested in, which is, I've heard so many arguments from you and those who support this regime around ethanol that it's so positive in various ways. If it's so positive, why does it need so much government support?
Well, Steve, the market's just not competitively fair when you're talking about ethanol and biodiesel and all the renewable fuels that are, relatively new fuels compared to, gasoline and oil that's been around for decades and decades, 103 years worth of subsidies that they've got going back. And so, we're not talking about apples to apples here. We're young industries and old industries that are still getting tax subsidies.
No, look, I completely agree with you about subsidies elsewhere in the energy sector. In fact, we did a Swamp Watch very early on in the life of the show on a range of subsidies to green energy companies. So I completely agree about that. But, two wrongs don't make a right. Why does the ethanol industry need to be propped up by these regulations? It's not direct subsidies. I agree with you there. It's not money going from the government, but it is all these regulations that
tax
require and it sustains the market, which couldn't survive on its own.
So currently, Steve, there's absolutely no tax credits that are out there for any biofuels whatsoever. If you look at the other ones going back, they stand in place for a number of years. But biofuels in general and ethanol, they'd stand alone. They'd do well on themselves. But I'll tell you what, they're still young. They need support. It's also not in place only as a biofuel standard. It's there for air quality, and there's a lot of other positives that come from it. It's certainly helps farmers out there all across the U.S. when we're talking about support for products that we're producing. At the end of the day, you're talking about refining, and you're talking about ag processing, and so anytime you can add value, whether it's corn, soybeans, anything in my state in particular that we grow, if we can add value and process it here, those are good economic drivers. If you look at the long-term things that we've had happen, within this industry, it's created more feed, different choices out there for cattlemen, for poultry producers, for hog folks. At the end of the day, the policy's been good in a lot of different places, and it's not just not just the ag folks that are winning on this. There's the air quality benefits go across the U.S.
I want to get into the air quality because there's disputed studies on that, but I just want to conclude with, I think which should be the focus for all of us here. What we should really care about are the farmers, the people, small family farmers and farmers who are trying to earn a living. That's what, that's what populism is all about, is backing people like that.
Sure.
How much is how much of the corn that's grown goes to ethanol? How can we end this reliance on this and ensure a future living for farmers right across America, but not just in Iowa, but throughout the country?
Well, this is certainly helping ensure that farmers make a good living.
But is there any other way than doing it through these government regulations?
Around 40% of the
there must be another way of doing
the corn goes to ethanol right now. But with that, within that, there's a whole lot of that corn that comes back as the dry distillers grains that are used as feed grains going into these other feed uses for cattle, hogs, and poultry. So it's just one of the many tools to help farmers. To be honest with you, if you really look at it, we need all kinds of different things to help help ag products out there and help rural America. So
I agree.
This is a great tool in the toolbox, and it's one of the things that we need. We need to continue it. We're producing more corn. Last year was a record corn crop that biggest one we've ever had. This year was close, and even in tough times, we've been through in 10 years of this standard. We've had great crops for a lot of it, and in 1 year
Kevin,
we had a rough year.
I'm so sorry to cut you off because we're out of time. I do appreciate you coming on, and as I say, I think we can totally agree about the importance of a livelihood for farmers. I'm just not sure this is the right way to do it. But anyway, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for being here tonight.
I can tell you it's helping us here in
Sorry,
Iowa. So Merry Christmas.
That's all we have time for. Coming up next, Merry Christmas to you, Kevin. Thank you. In a previous Swamp Watch, we exposed Silicon Valley's economic treason in China. Wait until you see what Google announced this week about its own plans there. That's next.
The real gift